So, good evening. Welcome to another co-family worship. I hope that by this time you are learning, and if not, you are free to watch it even if I depart from this world. So, in this co-family worship, we're reading from this book, the Westminster Larger Catechism. It's a commentary by Johannes Voss, and it's edited by G.I. Williamson, who recently went to be with the Lord. So we are reading from chapter 13, God's will expressed in our duty to others. We'll be reading question 134 and 135. Okay? So I'll be asking my son Kyler to read to read 134 and 135.
Question, what is the sixth commandment? Answer, the sixth commandment is thou shalt not kill. Question, what are the duties required in the sixth commandment? Answer, the duties required in the sixth commandment are all careful studies and lawful endeavors to serve the life of ourselves and others by resisting all thoughts and purposes, subduing all passions and avoiding all occasions of vicious and practices extended on just taking away the life of any by just defense thereof against violence, patience, bearing of the hand of God, quietness of mind, cheerfulness of spirit. Yeah.
Okay. So in question 34, what is the sixth commandment? The sixth commandment is thou shalt not kill. So what are the duties required in the sixth commandment? The duties required in the sixth commandment are all careful studies and lawful endeavors to preserve the life of ourselves and others by resisting all thoughts and purposes, subduing all passions, and avoiding all occasions, temptations, and practices which tend to the unjust taking away of life of any by just defense thereof against violence, patient bearing of the hand of God, quietness of mind, cheerfulness of spirit. Exodus 20 verse 13, we see there the sixth commandment. Ephesians 5:28 to 29, the duty of preserving our own life. 1 Kings 18:4, the duty of preserving the life of others. Jeremiah 26:15 to 16. Acts 23:12 to 27. It is our duty to resist all thoughts and purposes which tend to the unjust destruction of human life. Ephesians 4:26 to 27. Passions which tend toward unjust destruction of life are to be subdued. 2 Samuel 2:22, Deuteronomy 22:8. Occasions tending the unjust taking away of life must be avoided. Matthew 4:6 to 7, Proverbs 1:10 to 16. It is our duty to avoid all temptations which tend toward the unjust destruction of life. 1 Samuel 24:12, 1 Samuel 26:9 to 11, Genesis 37:21 to 22 talks about all unjust taking away of the life of any human being is wicked. Psalm 82:4, Proverbs 24:11 to 12, 1 Samuel 14:45 tells us that the sixth commandment requires the just defense of human life against destruction by violence. James 5:7 to 11. Hebrews 12:9. The sixth commandment requires patient submission to the will of God as disclosed by God's providence. 1 Thessalonians 4:11, 1 Peter 3:3-4, Psalms 37 verses 8 to 11, Proverbs 17 verse 22 tells us a serene mental attitude and cheerful spirit are required of us by the sixth commandment. So what is the meaning? The meaning of the word kill in the sixth commandment. The word kill is used in the sense of to commit murder. The Hebrew text of the commandment is accurately translated, "Thou shalt do no murder." The Catechism rightly interprets the commandment in this sense as not forbidding killing as such, but the unjust taking away of life of any person. This is a correct definition of the sin of crime of murder. What general positive duties are required by the sixth commandment? All careful studies and lawful endeavors to preserve the life of ourselves and of others. What is meant by careful studies to preserve the life of ourselves and others? This includes every form of human research and planning directed toward the preservation of life. For example, it includes such varied matters as scientific investigation of the causes and prevention of diseases, studies of chemistry directed toward discovering drugs which will save life or prevent suffering, plans from preventing traffic accidents on the highways, designing lighthouses by which ships can be warned of dangerous rocks, agricultural research by which productivity of the soil can be increased, and development of swift and efficient means of communication by which quick relief can be brought to the suffering in time of disasters such as earthquake, fire, and flood. What is meant by lawful endeavors to preserve life of others and ourselves? This means all efforts directly and indirectly aimed at preserving human life. Thus, it is our duty to preserve our own and our neighbor's life, but not by telling a lie, or by denying Christ, or by betraying our God-given responsibility to our country. We may not do evil that good may come, even in order to save our own or some other people's lives. In addition to the actual literal crime of murder, what does the sixth commandment requires us to avoid? Besides the actual crime, it also requires us to avoid, resist, or subdue whatever tends towards the unjust destruction of human life. Thus, we are to resist thoughts and purposes, subdue passions, and avoid occasions, temptations, and practices which tend toward such destruction of life. It should be noted that the Catechism prudently avoids attempting to present a list of such occasions, temptations, and practices, etc. No such list could possibly be complete, adequate, or permanently valid. Some practices such as dueling, bullfighting, shooting the rapids of the Niagara River in a barrel clearly and unquestionably tend toward the unjust destruction of human life. The sixth commandment therefore requires that they be avoided. But there are other practices which might be regarded as doubtful. For example, the attempt to cross the Pacific Ocean in a small sailboat. The Catechism lays down the principle, but wisely leaves the precise application to the principle, to the sanctified common sense of Christians. So what is included in the unjust defense of human life against violence? This requirement of the sixth commandment includes the duty of the nation to protect its people against unjust violence to all enemies, foreign and domestic, as well as the duty of every individual to defend himself and others against violence on the part of the lawbreakers of all kinds. Thus, the sixth commandment involves the right and duty of defensive warfare and of the power of the police in enforcing law and order, as well as the right and duty to defend oneself and other person against criminal violence whenever occasion may require. What does the sixth commandment require? Patient bearing of the hand of God, patient submission of the will of God as it is disclosed to us by the events of God's providence is necessarily for our true mental, spiritual, and physical well-being. To be impatient or rebellious against the hand of God is essentially self-destructive. For only in submission to God's will and in harmony with Him can our true destiny be reached and our true welfare secured. This is involved in the basic truth that human beings are creatures of God and their true welfare consists in union and communion with God. When Christian people are impatient and rebellious under God's providential dispensations, they dishonor God and injure themselves. The reprobate in hell will, to all eternity, continue in total and totally frustrated rebellion against God and the will of God. When the Christian gives way to impatience and rebellion against God's will, he is conducting himself to some extent like the reprobate in hell. Why are quietness of mind and cheerfulness of spirit required by the sixth commandment? It is generally known and recognized that a serene mental attitude and a cheerful frame of mind tend toward good health and long life. Worry and anxiety and a pessimistic attitude cause a tremendous amount of needless wear and tear on the human personality. The influence of the mind on the body is well known. It is the Christian's duty to face life serenely and cheerfully in spite of disappointments, sufferings, and hardships, in order to glorify God in His body and Spirit, which are God's property and are consecrated to God's service. Let us continue with the question 135. What are the duties required of the sixth commandment? The duties required of the sixth commandment are sober use of meat, drink, physics, sleep, labor, and recreation, with charitable thoughts, love, compassion, meekness, gentleness, kindness, peaceable, mild, and courteous speeches and behavior, forbearance, readiness to be reconciled, patient, bearing, and forgiving of injuries and requiring good for evil, comforting and succoring the distressed, and protecting and defending the innocent. Proverbs 25 verse 6 and Proverbs 25 verse 27. 1 Timothy 5 verse 23 tells us that the sixth commandment requires a sober use of meat and drink. Isaiah 38:21, the sixth commandment requires a proper use of medicine for the relief of suffering and the prolongation of life. Psalm 127 verse 2, 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verses 10 to 12, Proverbs 16:26, Ecclesiastes 3 verse 4, Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11, Ecclesiastes 5:12 tells us that the sixth commandment requires a proper and temperate use of sleep, work, and recreation. 1 Samuel 19 verses 4 to 5, 1 Samuel 22 verses 13 to 14, Romans 13 verse 10, Luke chapter 10 verse 34 to 33 to 34, Colossians 3 verses 12 to 13, James 3:17, 1 Peter 3 8 to 11, Proverbs 15:1, Judges 8:1 to 3 tells us that the sixth commandment requires kindness and love in thought, word, and deed. 1 1 Thessalonians 5:14, Job 31, verses 19 to 20, Matthew 25, verses 35 to 36, Proverbs 31, verses 8 to 9. It is our duty to help and confront those in distress and to protect and defend the innocent from injustice. So what is meant by sober use of meat, drink, etc.? This means a conscientious, careful, temperate use of these things, such as will not have a harmful effect on our body, our health, and our mental alertness. We should realize that the Bible represents gluttony as sinful, as well as drunkenness. What is the meaning of the word physics? The word in the Catechism means we call medicine today. It should be understood as including not only drugs, but all scientific means and methods used to relieve suffering or prolong life. Is it wrong for a Christian to make the medicines or scientific treatment to relieve suffering or cure diseases? Of course not. In past times, some zealous Christians have maintained that it is wrong, and that Christian who uses medicine is not really trusting in the power and goodness of God. We should understand that faith in God is not contrary to the use of legitimate means. God has mitigated the curse by placing in the world for mankind to discover the means by which human suffering can be alleviated and prolonged life. To refuse and make use of these means because we trust in God involves a mistaken notion of what it means to trust in God. Really, our faith in God requires us to use the proper means which His providence has placed in our disposal. What would we think of a farmer who would say, I will not plow my fields or plant any seed. I will just trust in God to give me a harvest. What attitude should the Christian have towards sleep, work, and recreation? The Catechism presents the teaching of the Bible on the question by stating the sixth commandment requires a sober use of these things. Sleep, work, and recreation are all necessary to human life. Without them, we cannot have a healthy body and an alert mind. But sleep, work, and recreation must be kept in balance with each other, with right proportion of time devoted to each other. And all three must be subordinate to the great purpose of life, of human life, which is to glorify God and to enjoy Him. Laziness and slothfulness are sinful, but so is immoderate and idolatrous addiction to work, as well as devotion to excessive amount of time to recreation. Many Christians who would not think of indulging in the common gross forms of intemperance should consider whether they may not be guilty of some of the less obvious forms of intemperance. For a party or social gathering to continue hour after hour until the late night, with a result that those present are tired and unable to work efficiently the next day, is a form of sinful intemperance. So the modern American worship of speed, luxury, and financial success, the Christian should cultivate an attitude of conscientious carefulness about all these matters, realizing that he is steward of God. Why does the sixth commandment require us to maintain the peaceable and kindly spirit toward others? Because contrary spirit, that is an unkind, unreasonable, unloving spirit, will inevitably have harmful effects both on ourselves and on others. It will disturb our own and our neighbor's peace of mind. And by the influence of the mind and on the body, the effect will be to injure to a greater or lesser degree our own and neighbor's body's health. Anger, stubbornness, harsh and unfriendly spirit, and similar attitude cannot but have a harmful effect both on the mind and on the body. This is a form of killing. which the law of God certainly forbids. What is meant by forbearance? This means by willing to suffer some wrong rather than being hasty to stand up for our rights and insist upon justice for others. Why should a Christian have a readiness to be reconciled? Because by amazing love and grace of God, the Christian has himself been reconciled to God. Therefore, he should be willing and even eager to be reconciled to his fellow men as far as possible. Why should a Christian patiently bear and forgive injuries? Because God has freely forgiven all sins. Therefore, in gratitude to God, and Christians should have a patient and forgiving spirit toward his fellow men. Does the Catechism mean that no matter what others may do, we must bear it patiently without protest or opposition? Certainly not. It may sometimes be our duty as well as our right to seek justice from the constituted authorities of the church or state, but even when it is our duty to oppose and seek to restrain the actions of others, we are not to hate them, but to maintain kindly and forgiving spirit toward them, especially when the rights of God and the truth of God are at stake. It is our duty to stand up courageously for truth and righteousness. Without respect of persons, kindness to men must never induce us to become lukewarm in the defense of God's truth. What is the Christian duty toward the distressed? The parable of Good Samaritan, as well as the text cited by the Catechism, teaches us that it is our duty to do what we can to comfort and relieve those in distress, whoever they may be. Our neighbor is the person in need whom we have the power to help. Especially, it is our duty to relieve the suffering and distresses of our fellow Christians, not only in our own church or community, but anywhere in the world. What is the Christian's duty toward the innocent? By the innocent, the Catechism means the innocent persons who are in danger of being treated as guilty persons and who are already suffering as if they were guilty of some wrong. It is always our duty to protect others against injustice so far as it is in our power to do so. This is true in small matters as well as great, in all spheres of human society, including family, church, and state. We will end here. Lord willing, we will be reading what is forbidden in the sixth commandment next Lord's Day. Okay, let us all stand as I ask Anya Kaven to close us in prayer.
Dear God, thank you for this Sunday. Thank you for this time for our Catechism. Thank you for our stop, our for today. In Jesus' name.
Amen. All right.